Welcome to Business Beyond Borders, the go-to podcast for CPA firms seeking transformative insights. I'm your host, Laurence Whittam, and with each episode we'll uncover key insights, best practices, and invaluable resources tailored for CPAs. From trending strategies to diving deep into outsourcing and offshoring, our experts will help in all areas of your business.
So usually, like the announcers, they write out Kepczyk.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
And you go by Laurence, right?
Yeah, just Laurence is good.
Lawrence is fine.
So Larry's a big nickname over here in the US.
I know
I'm super fond of it.
I know. I have a good friend, Larry Bernstein, and he he goes by Larry instead of Lawrence. So
yeah. So and then Director of Firm Technology Strategies, right?
That's just strategy, firm technology strategy.
Okay. Right, works. Okay. Yeah, and I'm good. And so what we'll do, I think you saw the questions, but talk a little bit about, again, I'll let you give more of the intro about yourself, to be honest, but I'll do a very quick intro about what we're talking about. Talk a little bit about that national pipeline side of things for accountants, what you see, so that we can cover more of the people side of things, what you see that firms can do to actually help with that.
Yep.
Right. And then again, it becomes more natural as we're going through it anyway, conversationally, but then we can talk towards the end, maybe touch on a couple of the technology pieces, right? That can also help out from that perspective. That'll be awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And we actually just did a tax debrief survey. Okay. And identified, the firms that had like a great tax season and those that had their worst ever. And we I went through, there was like 200 responses, but I went through, I basically broke out the best and the worst and compared them side by side. And we found that in most cases, like on technologies, the best firms were doing between double and triple the amount of firms were doing things like scanning and bookmarking, using a workflow, doing PDF. They were using more technology. They also had more remote staff and flexible work hours. So those are the kind of things I can bring up.
Cool.
And then we did a webinar on that. Is that something I usually have a no pitch policy, but can I mention that on the RightWorks website under resources, there's a free webinar that explains, what technologies were better or worse. Is that something that's allowable?
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, my big thing is like, again, the actual content of stuff is very valuable to me, and like best practices, I always try and tell people like, don't come on and pitch, right? Because nobody's going to care. But, but if you've got resources, I want them to go to the resources at the end of the day. So
because I do both Drake
as well.
Yeah, I do Drake and Intuit's security briefings, and they're very, very precise about not pitching any kind of like for the AICPA, I do their checklist, cybersecurity checklist, create that, and there's certain people that just will not allow me to say any of that. So
no, please do, especially related to the AICPA and stuff as well. If you've got certain things around, I always really like when it comes to the outsourcing piece, I push any technology. I'm like, whoever you're using, go speak to them, because I guarantee they've got more information than I even do on what systems you should have set up, how you set it up. So if you've got resources that are there that are accessible, perfect. Please mention it.
And then when I close, if you would, you ask about additional thoughts. I feel very strongly that you're going to have hybrid employees, you're going to also have remote employees, and you're probably going to have some outsourced employees. And so I think the part that most firms don't do a good job on, like for final thoughts, they don't take their security of all these people seriously enough. And so I think that we should address that somewhere in here. How do you train your staff? And just as importantly, training your clients, when you're working remotely and collaborating with them.
Yep. No, that would be perfect. Yeah. Okay. Anything related to the people in cybersecurity, would love to have your take on that piece. Yeah. So,
do you want to start a clean recording or just edit all this out?
I keep it going, but what I do is I just put my hand up. She knows where to cut from then. And then we sort of jump into it, if that works.
Perfect.
So I like to keep it, because then it's got the transcript as well. And sometimes the transcript doesn't work. So, all right. So, but we'll get started in 5 seconds if that works for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Business Beyond Borders. So we have a very cool episode today. So I'm here with Roman Kepczyk, and he's the Director of Firm Technology Strategy, right, for WriteWorks. And we're going to discuss a few different aspects today. And again, a lot of you have probably seen Roman around, and he's big advocate of the cyber, the IT side of things, obviously coming from WriteWorks, but he's invested a lot of time and effort into even the talent pipeline and different things around really everything across the profession, all the challenges he spoke on over the time. And again, we ran into each other recently at Engage, and I thought it would be extremely helpful to not only get some of the IT sides of things covered today so that you can be more secure when you're working with offshore providers, more secure when you're working in outsourcing or whatever capacity, even within your firm, you're more secure, but also covering some of that talent pipeline conversation that's going on. So Roman, very nice to have you on. Would love for you to give a quick intro about yourself as well and what you're currently doing.
Oh, thank you, Laurence, and thank all of you for listening in today. Pretty much, I'm an outsourced IT partner to CPA firms. I was actually a partner in a large regional firm for about 10 years, and then realized that everyone was going through the same thing my firm was going through, and that was transitioning to a completely digital environment. And so for the last 20 plus years, I've worked with over 400 firms walking through digital best practices, infrastructure. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, so everything is a process to me. And my primary role at WriteWorks is providing clients and people that use our services with what applications are working, what are the trends, and helping them make better decisions.
Cool. And let's maybe start out in the talent pipeline side of things. So when it comes to that, I mean, what are you seeing? Obviously, you're talking to firms. You're obviously talking about staffing a lot of the times because that's probably one of the bigger challenges. And then it comes towards the technology. But what are you currently seeing from even some of the larger firms down to the small ones? Are they all having the same problems or?
Well, absolutely. When you look across the board, I sit on two consulting boards, and that was one of the biggest topics we spoke at. And then, as you're aware, we were at the AICPA Engage this past week. There was a whole keynote dedicated to that, and just as much at the BDO Evolve conference that we were at 2 weeks ago. And so what we realize is, there's a shortages across the board, whether you're a small firm, medium, large firm that's out there. And it's for a variety of reasons, but one of it, business has never been better. These firms are doing great. They're growing. They're taking on new clients. They're doing more advisory services, so they have less time to do traditional compliance work. And so we keep pushing work that needs to be done down to the next level. And it's resulting, honestly, in shortages across the board with everyone. So, we have a lot of different choices out there. I'll talk a little bit about how to help firms with that. But it is top of mind, whether you are a 5-member firm, a 50-member firm, or a 200-plus multi-office firm.
So what are you seeing firms actually doing to try help with this, right? Because again, it comes to, there's obviously different ways you can do it. There's technology, there's AI, there's outsourcing, there's offshoring, there's leveraging the gig economy domestically. Like there's a lot of different ways that we can, but what are you seeing that firms are really like spending the most effort on doing? And maybe that changes based on the size of the firm. Yeah. But if you could give a bit of insight into that would help.
Well, you actually nailed the big four that's out there. First of all, staffing is the number one thing, and we need to hire more accountants, and that includes hiring college interns, administrative staff, and as you mentioned, onshoring and offshoring. We need to get more people into our firms, and including non-traditional financed people. But the side I work on more so, I know everyone's working on that, but we talk about work realignment, and what we're finding is that if you analyze the work of a staff person, a senior, a manager, even a partner, they're doing too much administrative type level work or work that could be pushed down to a lower level. And we've seen some of the firms that we find from our debrief survey, one of the most successful things that they did was they identified such rote work and then hired an admin person or a non-traditional person out of finance or another area. And they would have that person trained by the accounting person or the tax person who knew that role and that would continue to oversee it, but it allowed to be able to push down some of that less technical work so they could focus on the more technical work. Another component we talk about is, client realignment. We've talked about purging over the years, getting rid of your C and D clients. But with more and more work coming out and more of us becoming advisory, it's time now to reevaluate what is your ideal client and what are the requirements. And in virtually every discussion we had in this area, it's getting rid of those standalone 1040s. They take a lot of time. They take away from the availability to handle your good clients. And honestly, they lead to burnout. And so if you can't take a 1040 client and push them upstream to more either starting with a, tax projection or something like that, but even primarily targeting business clients that you can expand work into year round, I'm here to do that. So we're seeing, firms, going through the purge of anything that's not an ideal client. And then the last area that I talk about is, technology, which is my primary focus. And what we see internally in firms is we need to get rid of the wasted time, not having the best data out there. And what I look for when I'm consulting with firms is any place you have a spreadsheet that people have to update and maintain, step back from there and look at, is there a way your workflow tool can do that more effectively, your practice tool, these kind of things? Because what we've seen in the last 5 years, particularly in the last 2-3 years, is great workflow tools that allow everyone to have a dashboard of everything that's going on inside of the firm. We also have seen great improvements in efficiency with the team collaboration tools, using Teams and Zoom, particularly when you have, everyone's going to have a hybrid employee, a remote employee, even those outsourced employees that are overseas. How do you communicate? And does everyone know how to communicate at the same level at a digital environment? So we're going to become experts at Teams and Zoom. So that's internally, but from a technology perspective, we also need to bring our clients into the mix. So when we talk about external collaboration, we need to be as comfortable communicating with our clients digitally in the way they want to, but also with transferring data. One of the key technologies for this next generation environment is we have to be 100% digital, 100% accessible. So we've seen great adoption of modern portals that allow us to work and collaborate very easily with clients and allow other staff members to get access to that data. It's much better for engagement management. And then there's great tools out there. We've seen like Paperless SafeSend, SureLink, Practice Ignition. These tools make it easy for us to work with our clients. They're very intuitive on how they work and everything. And so our clients, literally, it makes it easier for them to send us data at their convenience and, most importantly, in the right format so we can bring it into the firm and the tax return. So those are the main technologies. I will have to say AI is becoming the wild card. Both you and I saw many AI sessions there, but it's not just the generative AI stuff like ChatGPT and everything, but there are advances in narrow AI, such as, machine learning, robotic process automation, algorithms being integrated into the existing apps we're using. And we saw major announcements from the top vendors, the well-known ones, as well as some great little startups that basically improve collaboration between our firm members and our clients that are out there. So.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of those areas that, I think everyone's a little bit overwhelmed with the speed of the AI has taken over the last 2 to 3 years. And it has been really, especially in this profession, the reason is because I think a lot of firms had to change so drastically because of COVID, right? In terms of virtual working, which they never really did. So then now they started to adopt other things and actually start looking into these aspects, and ChatGPT being the most generalized and fastest growth in a sense. But a lot of these vendors are actually taking this and plugging it into very specific areas with the process of accountants and thinking about the things that, like you said, those pieces of a process that an accountant doesn't need to be a part of, right? Is the big thing, which means you can actually add talent. And then, okay, now we've actually got less work for an accountant to do. Great. Now they can be leveraged for other areas as well. So you don't necessarily need to keep adding more and more staff when you can optimize little pieces of the process as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that exactly inside of the like CAS advisory services, where they've built a tech stack that uses narrow AI, the robotic process automation, machine learning. And what people sometimes confuse is they say it's AI, but when you're dealing with algorithms and robotic process automation, there's no hallucinations, there's no variation. If you ask the same question in ChatGPT twice, 5 minutes apart, you can get a different answer. But this narrow AI has a very specific purpose to what it's supposed to do. And it works every time, unless the client changes, an account number, or the bank changes the way the website's set up. But these are the kind of tools that, instead of humans inputting data or analyzing and transferring it, it's just processed, just like, when we transitioned from, doing paper ledgers to, using QuickBooks and Sage Intacct, these products where you put in the data and it's going to show up in the general ledger and in the financial statements properly.
Yeah, and it's and even just simple tool. I mean, you mentioned about Microsoft Teams and Outlook and things like that. I mean, literally just this morning when I was on Outlook, and it gave me a notification about Microsoft Teams being implemented into Microsoft Outlook now. So you literally just click on the button. You don't need to travel around to having a separate dashboard open for Teams anymore, right? It's actually integrated all into it. So they're actually pulling in the co-pilots there and everything. So you can use that full suite now within just one browser.
Absolutely.
A lot of that. So it's just developing so quickly. And the other piece you mentioned earlier was very specifically around that process side of things. So can you share a little bit more about, because I love the process side, because I think there is a lot of people within firms that create a standard operating procedure for their different divisions, for the work that they're doing, but they don't necessarily look at it very often, right? Or they've wrote it 5 years ago and they've never revisited it. There's now new technology, but also because it's so important when it comes to leveraging talent that is not an accountant, that does not necessarily know the same way as you're doing it, and or using offshore talent that has a gap in skill set in a lot of cases because they're not living the same day-to-day life. So how do you go in there? And what do you see from that process side? What's the easiest places that they can just think about taking that step to look at those?
Well, you pretty much need to have a standardized digital infrastructure and system so everyone does things consistently, both you and your clients. And so when we look at like remote access solutions, if you have some people using RDP and other people using a different type of VPN, some people using different tools, it's hard to provide support for that. So everyone needs to have a single standardized digital platform, which by default means cloud-based infrastructure. That is professionally managed. So when you link in, whether you are a auditor out at a client site, a hybrid employee working from home, or someone working from the Philippines as an outsourced, everyone needs to connect to the infrastructure consistently and with security built into it. And so for the listeners that have their own network and they continue managing it, I would strongly encourage them to go to a managed security services provider to make sure their system is locked down. I can't overemphasize security enough. I mean, actually, during COVID, you brought that up earlier. It forced a lot of firms to go to Windows Remote Desktop and VPNs, and those quick solutions or transfers that honestly many firms still use today. The FBI actually had to put out a notice during COVID that those RDP remote connections were responsible between 70 and 80% of all network breaches leading to ransomware attacks out there. So, so the first part is making sure that everyone has very specific, concise access to a secure environment. They need to be utilizing the right security tools. So we recommend that you mandate a complex password infrastructure, including using like a password wallet. So every login is unique, and using multi-factor authentication as part of that. Then when we talk about like moving work through the firms, the number one tool that we've seen improve efficiency is a workflow tool. And a lot of firms traditionally use their practice management projects tool in a combination of due date tracking and spreadsheets. But it led to multiple places of inputting data. And we found that tools, I mean, the drive to develop these tools was created by a group called XCM, which is now known as CCH workflow. Thomson has their version called FirmFlow Advanced Flow. We see other tools doing as part of practice, but optimizing that tool so everyone has a dashboard so they can see the status of every project is critical, because if you have those remote employees, they could be even working in a different time zone. They should be able to open up a dashboard when they get in to do their work and know all the projects that are assigned to them, any questions on work they've done in the past, the status of that. And it goes all the way through from the engagement letter to the delivery of the either the tax return, the assurance service, and the invoice. So workflow is critical. And then when we talk about go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, when we're talking about like utilizing these tools as well and coming in, like, what's the overall sort of like system? Because like you said, you've got a lot of people that have their local network, right? And they're still doing it in that way. They're not necessarily on the cloud in any capacity in a lot of cases. Like they have QuickBooks Online, so that's in a separate area, right? They have all these different apps that are now coming out. Now, when you are, especially when it comes to like the outsourcing and using talent nationwide, how can somebody really control it more so when it comes to an employee to employee? I mean, I tend to say like you really should have like a zero trust method,
Absolutely.
Right? Across the board, domestically, internationally, whatever the case, but to ensure that, and also from a person to person, just give them very heavy restrictions where it doesn't impact the workflow of what they're doing, but they have to have the right restrictions in there. Yep. But they also don't need to have access to every client, right? Or a different software that they don't use, right? So, I mean, but what do you advise from that perspective, and how easy is it to set up? Because I know it's software to software can be a bit cumbersome at some points, right?
Well, we say absolutely no BYOD, bring your own device. So any remote employee needs to work on a firm managed device that is locked down so that, like at RightWorks, our standard is our USB drives are locked down so that you can plug in like a microphone or a camera, but will not transfer or allow the transfer of any data, because they have, 4 terabyte drives now you can plug into the USB flash drive to do backups and all that. So you need to lock down that workstation. The other advantage, and then we recommend laptops over desktops because then it provides one standard device that can also be used by the audit staff as well as anybody who's just consulting and has to leave the office. But these machines need to be 100% locked down. And then the advantage of that is it also allows to force upgrades of Windows and security applications. So these managed security service providers, they have their suite of tools they use that they will implement on that device to make sure that when you connect, and they all require, Duo or Okta multi-factor authentication to get in. So we can securely connect into you. And then above that, you touched on it, is the management of the data. And with Zero Trust, you only allow people to get access to the applications and data that they need to do their work. Now, I will tell you that does take a little bit more work on the administrative side internally, but when it's set up, so if you have people that only do CAS work, they get access to the QuickBooks, to the Bill.com, to ADP Paychecks, whatever payroll product, they have a limited amount of access, but that helps minimize that. If that person's machine is breached, they click on a phishing email or something, it limits the damage of what they can exfiltrate based on what they have access to.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions I get a lot when it comes to, especially like using talent that they haven't personally seen, right? In terms of they haven't been able to sit with them in an office and interview them. And again, there is a comfort factor there, but I do try and get across that, like, again, these are people that you do the same due diligence on, right? But they're just virtual, right? But there is a comfort level. So I understand that. Now, and the concern is, hey, how do I stop them from working in a Dunkin' Donuts, right? You mentioned that obviously people go out and consult, right? And they're in the offices and things like that. But generally speaking, when it comes to offshoring and outsourcing, really they should be in either a physical location. I advise, hopefully they're in the location, but eventually, like when they're trusted, they do have hybrid locations, right? In a lot of cases, or they're working from home now. In certain countries, they really pushed for work from home more so than others. So like, how can they restrict it a bit more in terms of like making sure they're at least accessing it from a specific location?
Well, I think if you have to force someone to like work in a specific environment, I think routers can be configured in such a way that they can only connect through that specific router. I'm not sure exactly how that's done, but I've heard of that being done. The question I address more often is when people are working outside of the office, how can they ensure that it's a secure connection? Because we consider any connection outside of that specific being in the office through that your own firm VPN, that's public Wi-Fi. And I run into this all the time with my auditors. They connect to the client's Wi-Fi and we say, no, you don't know if that's been compromised. So our tip actually is when you're on the road connecting to the firm to secure that connection in the tunnel, you should always use the mobile hotspot in your cellular device and connect through that. So that's the primary. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years where I know sometimes my dial-up was even, the 4G was bad, but 3G was worse, but I had to do daily timesheets and I got it done. But I never worried about it because that cellular connection was always, encrypted and was secure.
Cool. So again, one of the big things, and again, I would say it may be a little bit difficult for a small firm to necessarily restrict that. But again, everybody's got cell phones. Everybody has access wherever they are, whether they're in the Philippines, India, South America. So again, even having restrictions as to making sure they log in that way. Now, can you actually restrict that access to make sure that your server, for out of interest, is only being connected from that? Or is it more just education of the talent and your team that you have to make sure that they understand, guys, this is what we're doing. This is the only way that you should be logging in. What is there pure restrictions or how does that work?
Well, there are devices like mobile device management applications out there that only allow registered laptops, registered devices, even tablets, to connect to the firm. So when it gets down to the technical level, I think I don't think any firm is qualified enough to do their own security, so that everyone needs to work with that external managed security services provider. And so it could be the people that set up your network, but they need to be able to set up the VPN connectivity, the protocols to make sure that if there's massive amounts of transfer of data or something like that, it automatically is monitoring that with, today's intrusion detection prevention endpoint, response kind of tools, so that they're notified immediately if something weird happening there. And if someone's connecting from it, like if I always connect from an area code in the Philippines and I'm a remote worker, and all of a sudden someone tries to connect from India, there's something wrong there. It should, that managed security service provider should intervene at that moment and, make sure that they minimize any damage.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, and again, it's very difficult for a small firm, especially to be monitoring those types of things. So again, that's where the provider is a lot more, especially at that certain size of firms, is going to be extremely helpful, especially when you're out. So, and just comfort. It's peace of mind, essentially, for a lot more of the small firms that they know somebody else is managing that element of it.
Well, now, and I know it's controversial, but sometimes we say is for our workers that are at home, actually having your external provider configure that home workstation to make sure they separate the network between family internet connectivity and work-based connectivity. And just 4 months ago, there was a significant breach of one of the major home router providers where it compromised all of them. So making sure that on a regular basis, those remote VPNs, wireless routers, whatever they're using to connect, go through firmware upgrades, making sure the password is secure, that the latest patches are set up, and it's configured so that if one of the kids or the spouse happens to connect on a bad email and downloads garbage, it doesn't impact the traffic of that hybrid remote worker.
No, that's awesome. No, appreciate that. And now, can you maybe share, when we're going back to like the talent side of things a little bit, right? Let's say when it comes to whether it's offshoring, whether it's more of the automation side of things, but around this pipeline side of things, like, can you share any stories of firms that, and you don't need to mention the firm name, but who are actually doing it well, who are actually like implementing certain things that are having major impacts on making sure that they actually have a sustainable talent pool right now compared to others?
Okay. Yeah, we worked with a few firms that actually have set up offices in India. And, and the best known case I have is they had an employee who was from India, came here, worked and all that, became very good at tax processes and even involving CAS. And they went back and were able to take back their standards and set it up and handle all the security and infrastructure. So I think having the same standards of security and training for both the onshore team as well as the offshore team is critical. We need to all be using the exact same tools. We need to be well trained on those tools. And so why I'm kind of thinking about this firm is when we had our meeting or our conferences this week, talking about what made things great and what didn't. Over and over, all came out the things that were great was like we were well trained. We have firm standards. We have documented procedures. And a lot of those document procedures are now going to actually video type of training as opposed to the written manuals we used to do and hate to
like update. The Loom videos.
Oh yeah,
using those types of tools. Yeah.
And we actually I was at a debrief session yesterday at Engage where they said they started delivering Loom videos to their clients. What I found recently when they surveyed the group was more and more firms are using Teams to do that. And there's a service in Microsoft, which I had not heard of, called Stream, that does the same thing as Loom. So that was one of my to-do items there. But basically making sure that training is top of mind and that there are standards that they adhere to. Everything from not only processing the work, but also knowing the naming conventions and the directory structures, because everything's 100% digital. We all need to know how to get to source documents, resources, put the information in the right place. And so that is one of the differentiators of the firms that are really working well, across all different environments as opposed to those that are struggling and say it was the worst tax season ever.
Yeah. And I've seen it on the other side where it gets frustrating as well, because a lot of those questions and answers then end up coming to, even in some bigger firms that have done it, to managers that are coordinating with those team members that are offshore. But like they then start getting those types of questions where it's like, all right, I've already told you this once. Like, however, if it had gone to somebody that was more of a general basis, right, or gone to an IT team member or gone to a HR person rather than the manager, they wouldn't get as frustrated because that's what they're dealing with, right? I mean, That's why they're in that position. So, no, that's very helpful. And the other piece you mentioned there, which is great, was they came over here, right? They were here, they were in person, and I really push for that, right? In terms of getting some in-person time with whoever you're investing in offshore and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Figure out in your team who enjoys traveling. I mean, 99% of the talent offshore wants to come to the US. There's maybe not quite 99% of the talent onshore that wants to go to India necessarily, right? So figuring out but you will have a few people that enjoy traveling that want to do that. So, and I see the training element really gets bumped up in terms of effectiveness when you get to do some stuff in person.
Yeah, there needs to be a firm way of doing it. There needs to be a firm tech stack that's out there. And as we mentioned, that tech stack now is being extended to our clients in the portals and the collaboration components.
And just to be clear, like from that tech stack side of things, I know I've seen it a little bit as well with WriteWorks, like you're publishing quite a lot of information around here are different solutions. Now, do you have one firm way of doing it that it's this is our preferred way, or do you have flexibility with certain types of softwares based on the firm? Or
well, I know in the WriteWorks Cloud, Cloud Premier group, it's one space firm Premier. Pretty much, we tell the firm you've got to set it up, but we support over 5,000 applications. And then when I go into firms, my role is actually to reduce the number of applications and where possible, try to use a suite approach. Now, I will tell you that, remember 15, 20 years ago, all the big players, once Microsoft came out with a suite of tools, everyone tried to copy them. And we all went on a path of developing or acquiring all the applications within a specific suite, whether it was, Wolters Kluwer, Thomson Reuters, or, Intuit. But our surveys of the IT surveys we do, we've seen there's been a change in the last 4 to 5 years, and the surveys we do every other year, we've seen that more and more firms are adopting a best-of-breed approach to solve a specific problem, and then allows them to standardize and combine features. So a good example of that would be like a product like C Paperless, Safe Send, Safe Sign. Some people had a portal solution, they had an email signature solution, they had Adobe Acrobat, they had a workflow that tracked that. Well, it combined those 3 or 4 functions into one service tool.
Okay.
So there's multiple applications that, like, if you look at the Tech Stack webinar we did, it's available on our website. If you go to rightworks.com resources and just click on webinars, we have a complete tech stack that talks about the IT survey. We also have a security webinar. We have different types of customization that are all CPA firm specific.
Cool. And now as we start to wrap up, I know before we actually jumped on, we were talking a little bit about one of the more tax surveys that you did. I mean, do you want to share a little bit about that? Because I thought that was very interesting and helpful. That I think a lot of people would really find impactful.
Yeah, if you go, like I said, the resources, and then you watch the debrief survey we did right after tax season, we surveyed firms, and weird enough, we had 200 people or 200 firms exactly respond to it. And we went through and identified what were the things that were better and worse and the differentiation. And like I said, the firms that hired or pushed more responsibilities down to non-preparer staff, the firms that had employees that work remotely from home, implemented flexible work hours, had hired people specifically outside their geographical area or outsourced services, that had the best tax season, again, had double or triple as many firms were doing those things. Then when we went down the list of the worst firms, they just didn't hire staff. They didn't allow for remote or hybrid employees. And so it becomes very obvious that this hybrid, remote, outsourced environment is here to stay. And if you implement the technologies with workflow, scanning, bookmarking, doing PDF creation, all these things, it makes it a better to great tax season. And so going through the webinar, like I said, there's a lot of products, and we went through, it's an hour long, just explaining, what are the tools they adopted, what made a difference.
And just out of interest, what are those? What makes it better from a perspective? Is it more the mindset and the vision, or like they're personally responding, saying, yes, we had a great experience during the tax season, or was it more specific in terms of like we actually had the most profitable side of things, or the most revenue, or like how did that survey sort of take place out of interest?
Well, all the questions were open-ended. You know what I mean? So we said, what made this tax season great? And so, and I had to read all 200 of them to get the detail. And luckily, I quantified them in groups first. That was, the good and the great, the neutral, and then the worst and the really bad kind of thing. And so that was kind of, like I said, that's in the webinar. Just really, you see the firms that did all 4 of the things. They hired additional staff. They pushed work down to, I'll say, non-traditional CPA firms, admin people that was in there. They utilized collaboration technology. They forced a firm standard on their clients. So they told their clients up front, we will no longer allow you to email us or text us your W-2 1099 because it's not secure. And some people actually sent videos to their clients that said, this is our tax process moving forward. So they do this like after the October 15th deadline, say, you need to use our portal. You'll communicate with our staff this way because it's designed to protect you, protect your data, and to allow you to work efficiently with our firm as a team that's out there.
Cool. No, I mean, it's good to, and again, I do hear it more and more now that there are requirements being set from firms, which I think that was a big hesitancy previously. And again, not just from the cyber side. Again, it makes it more secure, right? But it makes things more efficient when actually they follow the standards that you are doing across the board. So where can people find you, Roman, if they have any questions around this? And we'll definitely post all that information as well in the description, but where's the best place for them to reach you?
Well, my email is roman@rightworks.com. But I write for a bunch of magazines and everything. They publish all of that on the WriteWorks website. We retain that right. So if you go to writeworks.com, the second layer on the menu there is resources, and open up either the webinars is probably the best place to start, because like I said, we're required to do security webinars for all of our people. We're a SOC 2 data center, so we have very specific requirements that we have to do, and which includes training from a security perspective. But all the findings of what firms are building their tech stack, that's a great webinar, because we kind of differentiated between small and large firms in that webinar. And then, of course, the tax season debrief was the one that kind of outlined, what made firms' tax season better to great, and what are the things that, put us behind.
Yeah. So no, appreciate that, Roman. Really, really appreciate all the tips as well today that you shared, and best practices for firms. And because this is one of definitely the biggest concerns and areas that come up in conversation when firms are looking at outsourcing and offshoring. And the biggest thing is, again, I can help in certain aspects. Generally, the outsourcing firms will share certain things, but my biggest piece of advice is go and talk to your MSP or your IT provider, whoever you work with from the IT side of it. Go and speak to them so that you feel comfortable with the security that's set up for those team members, offshore, onshore, nationwide. Yeah, go on, Roman.
And one tool that is very helpful is I write the AICPA's cybersecurity checklist. If you just do a search on AICPA cybersecurity checklist, Roman, either on our site or the AICPA site, download that. There's 22 things that we see are problems or things you got to get right, and sit down with that external provider, your managed security provider, and go through them and have them rate your firm, your organization, of how you're doing with these things. And what, if you're not doing the standard, what do you need to do to remediate it so that, you become less visible to the hackers?
Yeah. And one, adding on to that, actually, just quickly, is with bigger firms, if you're listening as well, is making sure that not just leaders know that you've done this activity, but make sure you actually teach everybody internally that this activity has been done. This is the outcome, because then when they're talking to clients, they actually feel a lot more confident in doing so. So the big thing is not just doing it, but actually passing that training along internally will make you more successful.
Yeah, and just one last item is everybody who files a tax return needs to have a written information security plan, or WISP. And so that's another service that we've started providing out there. Because the IRS has a 29-page document you can download for your WISP, but it's a little overwhelming. It's designed for big firms, not small firms. And we work with a group called Tech for Accountants that developed a comprehensive checklist that makes it very easy for you to analyze all the components of that WISP. Again, that's something you can meet with your managed security service provider and go through it and make sure you get it right for the IRS.
Cool. No, appreciate it, Roman. So, and again, we'll try, if you want to shoot over that link, we'll definitely put that link in. That'll be helpful. And everybody, I hope you had a great time on Business Beyond Borders on this episode, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers.
Thank you, Laurence.
Thank you for tuning in to Business Beyond Borders. I'm Laurence Whittam, and it's been a pleasure bringing you impactful insights tailored for the modern CPA firm. Remember, the world of accounting is vast and ever evolving, and we're here to navigate it together. For more resources and episodes, don't forget to subscribe and reach out to our experts. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your business and explore the limitless possibilities beyond borders.